So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We will start the session now. So on behalf of the EU SME Center in Beijing and the EU-China Business Association, which is an official associated partner of the EU SME Center, I would now like to warmly welcome you to our well-attended webinar focused on getting to know your partner. During this webinar, Mr. Alessio Pettino, business advisor of the EU SME Center and living in Beijing, will offer his guidance on identifying potential partners, conducting due diligence, and choosing the right partner in China and how to best prepare yourself. We have chosen this topic today because, as you know, for many of our companies, the travel restrictions to China and the sudden lockdowns, which are due to China's dynamic zero COVID policy, are one of the biggest difficulties now. Other major challenges for European business in China are also the slower growth of the Chinese economy, the global economic slowdown, and rising geopolitical tensions. But despite these difficulties, we need to persist. China remains an important market for our businesses and cannot be ignored. As many of us know, China's market offers long-term business opportunities. There is an enormous untapped potential for growth in the Chinese market, also taking into account China's growing middle class. And European companies also remain committed to China and continue to invest. They also believe there is more to gain than to lose from being in China. But European companies have more localization strategies involving building up local supply chains and partnerships. For example, also some large companies set up a regional China board to give it more autonomy and decision-making. Recent figures show that European investment in China increased slightly in 2021 to 8.6 billion euro compared to 8.5 in 2020. Most of the investments were greenfield investments, while European investment in China has already increased by 15% by the first half of this year. And this investment mainly comes from a handful of large firms. Virtually no new European firms have chosen to enter the Chinese market because of the travel restrictions. However, many business leaders are waiting for further relaxations of the travel restrictions so they can visit potential investment locations and meet potential business partners, because after all, it is important and essential to meet your business partner in person. For those who do not know us yet, let me say a few words about the EU-China Business Association, which is the association of bilateral China business associations promoting economic and trade relations between China and the EU. This is the only association of bilateral chambers of commerce dedicated to China. Members such as the Italy-China Council Foundation, the Flanders-China Chamber of Commerce, of which I am also in charge, the German-China Business Association, and so on. I'm not going to name them all. We have about 20,000 European and Chinese companies which are indirectly a member of us, and our aim is to be complementary to the national level. We organize high-level EU-China's events, such as a meeting with the European Trade Commissioner Dombrovskis in December, another upcoming EU-China conference with the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China on 12 January in Brussels, and many more. You can see these activities on our websites on www.eucba.org. I would like to keep it short. I would like to end here and give the floor to Mr. Davide Orlandi, who is the EU Partnerships Coordinator of the EU SME Center, who will give an introduction of the center's activities and how they can assist European SMEs on the Chinese market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Once again, welcome to everybody. It is very nice to see such relevant attendance to this webinar. As it was being said, I am the EU Partnership Coordinator at the European level for the EU SME Center. My task is that of ensuring that SME Center activities are well known throughout the entirety of the European Union, and as well to try and create opportunities for cooperation and collaboration at the European level. So for any questions about the activities of the USME Center, please do not hesitate to contact me. I have left my email in the chat section of this webinar. I would like to spend a couple of words on USME Center before giving the floor to Mr. Alessio Petino. This center is actually an EU-funded project that's already in its 12th year of life. It is funded by the European Commission. And as of now, it's entering its fourth phase. So we've already been running ever since 2010. A huge amount of activities have been carried out. I'm sure some of you already have had the opportunity to participate in some of our webinars and trainings, as well as have had the opportunity to assess the documents that we've published on our website. As you can see, this project is carried out by 6 partners, 4 consortium partners and 2 associated partners. We have a strong focus on the European Union. I am as well currently based in Milan, so there is no time zone issue in contacting me, so do not be worried about that. And the overall goal of the USME Center is that of supporting small and medium enterprises that would like to enter the Chinese market and have trade relations with China. How do we plan on achieving this goal is mainly through 5 services that are available free of charge for all European Union small and medium enterprises. First of all, we have the opportunity of directly accessing our website and taking a self-diagnosis tool. This tool has the goal of ensuring that the small and medium enterprise that would like to enter the Chinese market receives already a first assessment of their readiness in entering the market. Should there be some areas that are not sufficiently clear to the small and medium enterprise, the diagnosis tool will allow to be directed towards the relevant documents that are available on the website for the small and medium enterprise to directly consult to have a clearer idea of the areas in which they were not sufficiently ready. This leads me to the second service that we offer is the knowledge service. As I was saying, USME Center has been running ever since 2010. So up until now, we've developed a huge library, you can say, of documents that are easily accessible to everybody on the website. These include market reports, guidelines, and case studies. The third service that is offered is the Advice and Ask the Expert service. This is extremely relevant because it allows for the USME enterprise to directly contact our experts in China, in Beijing, and pose their question and receive targeted answers and not the general one. This is a first line of support for the small and medium enterprises that would like to enter the Chinese market and have some issues in entering it. The fourth service is that of organizing trainings and webinars. This can be tailor-made on the necessity of the USME Center partners. And the last one is the advocacy service that provides a consistent voice for EU small and medium enterprises in China. So it is mainly targeted to Chinese-based European Union-based entities that are already present in China. So without further ado, and without spending too much time on this short introduction, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Alessio Petino, who will be starting the presentation.
Thank you, Davide. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. Let me share my screen. Trying to find a way to do that. Okay. So, yes, good morning again. It's a great pleasure to be here today and present about this very important topic. As Davide mentioned, we as USME Center offer this advice service that basically is a sort of help desk that companies can use to ask us any questions, even technical questions, and we will help you understand these questions. So one of the very common questions that we receive, I would say on a weekly basis even, is from European companies that encounter issues when dealing with some Chinese companies. And the issues, of course, each issue is kind of unique, but I would say that we can in general group them under 3 categories. When buying from China, very common issue is that the European company that buys the goods receives the goods, but after a while, immediately or after a while, they realize that the goods are lower quality than what agreed, or maybe they are defective, and then this causes a lot of issues to them. Another less common scenario, I would say, is that they don't receive the goods at all. Of course, it's very unfortunate. When selling to Chinese companies, a very frequent issue would involve late payments. So not necessarily because of bad faith, but could also be genuine reasons, but this is a pretty common issue. So as USME Center, we believe that such issues, but at least many of these issues could be prevented and avoided if if the European companies make some background checks, make some preliminary due diligence on the Chinese partners, and to see whether there are some characteristics, some certain features that for us, in our understanding, are common characteristics of risk, and we call these common red flags for risks. You see a QR code here. We have produced some detailed guidelines on this topic. You can access them for free on our website. What I'm going to do today is to introduce in detail what these red flags are and what steps can be done to prevent such issues. Red flags will be now, before that, actually, I would introduce a few examples of questions that we receive from companies to give you an idea of the specific issues encountered. Then I will introduce these red flags and then some tips on how to do background checks from Europe without being present in China. And then we will have some time for Q&A at the end. Again, these cases, these examples, could involve anybody, and maybe in this case involve steel or certain products, but it could be on anything. So in this case, we have an European company that bought some steel and metals from a manufacturer in China, in Xiamen, and they paid the full amount, around 70,000 RMB, 70,000 euro in full before actually receiving the goods. So what happened is that the buyer received the goods actually, but they found out that the thickness of the plates that they were supposed, the boat was lower than what agreed. So there was an issue with the quality. So the company engaged a testing laboratory in Europe. They issued a report, but the Chinese seller didn't recognize it. They didn't recognize it for some reason. So the European company requests a refund or a new batch of products to the Chinese company, and the request was ignored. Second example is worse, obviously, that the so basically the steel involving steel, and company made a purchase of steels, advance payment in full was made. The goods were arrived, the quality was good, but that they realized that there were some of the quantity they paid for was missing from the container. In this case, was about 7 tons of steel, and so there was an issue with the quantity, and the European company went back to Chinese supplier, who offered to ship the missing materials if the European company made a second order of goods. So of course, the question would be, if they made a second order, would they encounter the same issue or not? So third issue actually is very special, and it's a pretty genuine dispute between two long-term partner, European company buying from a Chinese supplier. They have a very long-term relationship. What happens is that at some point, the Chinese seller had to change shipping company because the shipping company they usually use had some issues, they couldn't use it, so they changed shipping company, and the issue occurred with the shipping company. Basically, the goods that the European company bought were never received. There was no tracking number provided by the shipping company, so actually nobody knows where these goods are. The point is that even the Chinese manufacturer, of course, it's in the interest of the Chinese manufacturer to make sure that the goods arrive, because this is a long-term partnership and of course might affect their own business relationship. But even the Chinese manufacturer has having issue with the Chinese shipping company to find this tracking number, to find these goods. And so the result is that the goods were not received, but also that the European company actually didn't have, they cannot do anything because they didn't have a solid contract with the Chinese manufacturer. Because it's a long-term partner, they trust each other. This unfortunate situation with the shipping company happened, but since they don't have a contract, they don't have anything legal, the European company cannot do anything. So this, of course, has very serious consequences. Another example is that, of course, the worst could happen is that you pay for something, you pay for goods, you pay in advance. In this case, it was still steel and other metals, but the goods are actually never received. And there was this case with this company, with this supplier based in Wuxi, that they kept mentioning COVID restriction, like the area was in lockdown, they couldn't access the factory or things like those, which of course are true. We all know how strict measures in China could be. But I have to say that sometimes this could be, it's very easy to use these restrictions as justifications, let's say. And of course, sometimes you don't know whether these are true or not. What happened in this case is that after 2 months, the Chinese supplier stopped responding to the companies, to the European buyer, after they made the payments. Last case, it's mostly when selling to China. We see this happening quite frequently. It involves some notary fees or some other administrative fees that a Chinese buyer asked to the European seller. So there was this one single Chinese company actually that was involved in 2 cases that we received. One was a professor, another was an European company, and the Chinese company approached them and asking them, saying that they were very interested in the products. And in one case was books from the professor publications, and the other case was salami. And so very different. So so they signed a purchase order, and the purchase order said that 50%, both parties would need to pay 50% of notary fees. So this is very strange because sales contract, you don't need to be notarized. So this was already very strange. But in any case, the European seller was requested to pay 50% of these notary fees, which are not very high, maybe 1,000 euro, 2,000 euros. But only after the payment was done, the Chinese seller would, the Chinese buyer would pay for the goods that they wanted to purchase. The strange thing is that the notary fees would be paid by the European seller to the Chinese company. Instead of directly to the notary office, or so basically the Chinese company would serve as an intermediary to pay these fees. Other cases involved currency exchanges fees. For instance, the Chinese buyer would say, hey, my bank requires me to pay a certain fee in order to exchange currency from renminbi to euro, so please can you cover this fee, and so on. What happened is that after these notary fees, after these other fees were paid by the European seller, the Chinese company disappeared. So basically, this is very cheap. This is a very low kind of level scam, but these things happen. So all these issues, all these examples that I just provide have a lot of things in common. Of course, they're pretty unique, but in general, there are some aspects which are pretty much recurrent in all of these cases. And this is what we call red flags for risks. We see there are 6 main red flags, and but could be more, but I think these are the most frequent ones, at least that we as USME Center encounter. The first one is that Chinese company doesn't have a website. Sometimes these companies are found through Alibaba or through these platforms, but they don't have their own website, or if they do, they don't have a Chinese version of the website. Now, I want to show you something to show you what does it mean in practice. This is a company, you can see my screen, I guess, on my webpage, right? This is a company which there is absolutely nothing wrong with this company. It's just a random example, could be any other company. But you see this company here has a logo, has information in Chinese. There is, you know, the name of the
Alessio,
company.
we are still seeing the presentation of
slides.
PowerPoint. Yeah.
Okay. Let me maybe now. Yes. So I would say this is a random company, could be any company. Okay, there is nothing wrong with this company. But to show you that here you see on the website in Chinese, this is actually the name of the company. It also indicates where the company is based, and it provides a lot of information. You see the website, the name of this website, the domain is Gwenn Generator. If you search for this name, you might also encounter another website, which is called, same here, Gwenn Generator. The domain is slightly different, but it should be about the same company, even though the logo is different and so on. So what happens is that this website doesn't have any version in Chinese. Okay, everything is in English. And of course, if you have to buy from China, if you're a Chinese exporter, it makes sense to have a website in English, because if your clients are foreigner, in theory, in the majority of cases, they don't understand Chinese. But if there is no information in Chinese, it means that you don't know the name of this company, you don't know who this company is. You don't have any legal information on the company, because English names of Chinese companies have no value at all, no legal value. So if the website doesn't have a Chinese version, you know nothing about this company. It could be anybody. So this is very important for us. And the other thing is that all Chinese websites, in order to be legal in China, they need to have an ICP, an internet content kind of filing, and which actually looks a little bit like this. There is an emblem at the bottom of the page with the registration number, and in this case, they don't have. This doesn't mean that they are wrong, that they are they make frauds or things, but it's not right. So you should take this into consideration. Can you see my slides again now, or still the web page?
We are still on the web page.
Okay, then I'll stop and then I'll share again. So the website might sound very basic and similar, but for us it's very important. If there is no Chinese website, you don't know who this company is, you don't have any legal information about this company. Next, I would like to show you some stamps that we regularly see in some contracts when you buy from Chinese companies or when they buy from you. Sometimes you might see this kind of seals, this kind of chops being used. I would like to ask a question now to the audience. If you can, Davide, please start a poll. Looking at these stamps that I just show you here, or do you think these stamps are legit, are right, or do you think they have some issues? Maybe we give some time to answer. I cannot answer apparently, but yeah, these are all concrete examples that we find. The names are, of course, random names. Maybe we close the poll, Davide, and see the results. Okay, we see that, let's say, around 2/3 of the responses are they say no, they're not legit, and this is indeed the right answer. But we still see that 1/3 of the responses say these are legit. Let me tell you, these are not legit. These stamps have absolutely no value in China. They will not be recognized by Chinese courts in case a dispute arises, and you will have to provide all the evidence. If you see any stamps looking like this is, you should immediately be alerted that this is not legal. Well, have no legal value at least. The nice things about company shops in China is that they look pretty much the same. They have very standardized elements that you can easily recognize. These are two examples of how of how legal company shops look like. So you see they are usually in round shape. Actually, you can measure the diameter. I think is 4.3 centimeters or something. They have very standard, very precise size. It's in red. You usually have the company name in Chinese characters on the top, and then a big red star in the middle. Sometimes it could be bilingual. You see this example to the right. Sometimes you don't have the red star in the middle, but you have the Chinese company name. But this is mostly the case for law firms, consulting, or chambers of commerce. Usually for manufacturing companies, this is how the stamp looks like. If it has other shapes, other colors, or other, then it has no value. So make sure that all contracts have this kind of chops. Third, of course, the objective of somebody not very that want to maybe scam you or with low business ethics is that you pay in advance, especially of course if you're buying from Chinese companies. If I am a scammer, my objective is that you pay me without me sending the goods to you, or in any case before I send you the goods. So if the payment in advance is requested, you should be very careful. You should try to use other options, payment options, which are safer, like letters of credit, which are very common in China. Maybe people think they're not, but they're very common. I use this kind of methods. If you want to go ahead with paying in advance, then our suggestion is that to limit the percentage of the advance payment to a very small proportion and maybe pay the rest once the goods are received. Because after you pay, if something happens, there is very little possibility that you can get the money back. Another case, which is a bit less frequent, but it happens, involves a bank account. Sometimes if you're dealing with company ABC Limited, and then they provide a bank account from an individual person, natural person, this is wrong. This should be avoided. Or maybe another company, or maybe even from a bank located in other regions in China. If the company we're dealing with is based in Jiangsu province and they provide a bank account from, I don't know, Liaoning province, this is, you should ask why, you should be a bit careful. This is another very interesting aspect, is that the Chinese company has not paid its registered capital. So when you incorporate a company in China, you have to, of course, stipulate the registered capital, but you don't have to pay the registered capital immediately. You can pay it over a period of 50 years or 30 years, or a pretty long-term period. So you don't need to pay it now. What does it mean? This means that if you don't pay the registered capital, it means that you virtually have no assets that could be frozen or taken from a judge in case something happens. Of course, you might have some other assets, but you don't have the money, the registered capital. If you not pay this, you probably don't have any other assets. So I want to show again another example. It's very easy to check this registered capital. Can I show my screen? You can check the registered capital online through some specific platforms. You can see my screen, right? So there are some platforms. Again, this is the company we saw before. Again, it's a random company. There is nothing wrong with this company, I think, at least on paper. So there are some platforms where you can make this search. Maybe some of these platforms require a subscription, but we, as USME, they also require Chinese language knowledge, obviously. But if you don't have these resources, we at USME Center can help you doing that. So you can see here, there is this company. They agreed to have the registered capital of around 20 million renminbi. But it needs to be paid by 2057. At this stage, they only paid this amount, which is about 500,000 renminbi, which is a bit like 70,000 euro. Sometimes there are companies for which this information has not been disclosed, or you even have or they even disclose that the amount paid is zero. You can find it here. This is another example. And what we see from all the cases we have received, we have encountered from European companies, is that all the in all cases the Chinese company didn't have any didn't pay the registered capital. So if this is your case, you should be a bit careful. Then I mentioned also another red flag is that more money are asked suddenly to cover notary fees or other fees or tax or any kind of fees. Everything should be written in a contract. So if something suddenly comes, then you should be very, very careful. I would like to stress that the fact that there is one or more of these red flags doesn't automatically mean that a company is not safe. Or similarly, if there isn't any of these red flags, it doesn't mean that the company is safe. So these are just good practices that we see happening, but take them with some caution. It's just something that we see in practice. So these are things that you should aim for. You should aim before actually you agree on anything, you sign any contract, you should make some checks and try to identify any of these issues or other issues. And the way to do so is to, first of all, make some searches on web search engines. But the first thing you should do is to ask a copy of the business license of the company, of the Chinese company. This is like the ID card of the Chinese company where all the legal information are. And it's a very common practice to ask for it. So don't be afraid, ask a copy of the business license. And after you got it, you should check that the information on the company is on the business license is right. There are some public resources like this one that I'm showing you. This is a government website where you can search the company, see the information, match, compare the information. But there are also other platforms, private platforms like the one I showed before that we use, where you can actually also see if a company has been involved in some legal cases in the past. You can see there is a section, maybe I'll show it again because it's very interesting. There is, share again. There is, for instance, this platform. Actually, all platforms have this function, so it's not like this platform is better than others. But here there are a lot of information. This is related to risk, and you will see this platform here shows that this company in question has been involved, has had two cases. One is an administrative penalty, and another one is has been sued for trademark infringement, this company. And if you click here, you will see all the details about who is the, all the details about the case. So when you know the name of the company, the legal information of the company, make sure that you search for this company on this platform, see whether there are other, it has encountered some issues. Another thing is that maybe it's not very common, but sometimes even the company you're dealing with might also be a victim of a scam or issues. For instance, when there is maybe some former employee or somebody that uses the company name to sign contracts. And of course, in this case, the Chinese company might assist you because it's also in their interest to make sure that this case is solved. But what you should always do is first to ask business card of the person you're dealing with, to know the specific Chinese name of the person, because if you're dealing with I don't know, any Vicky Zhang, any random person, it could be anybody, but if you know the Chinese characters, you know who you're dealing with, you can try to call the company. If they do some export business, in theory they should have somebody speaking a little bit of English. If not, maybe you can find other ways, but maybe try to make a call to the company if you cannot visit the premises, to see that the person works there. And then the other thing is that if you reach an agreement, if you sign a contract, make sure that the contract has a company chop, like the chops that I showed before, and not like just a signature of this Vicky Jung that they mentioned before. Another thing that you can do, of course, try to contact us, because we see some companies, some companies actually have been involved in more cases, and we have some information about these cases. So maybe you can check with us if we know maybe a company or maybe some suggestion how to proceed. You can also contact your embassy in China. I assure you that most of the European embassies operating in China are very aware of this due diligence, of these issues. So you can also maybe check with them. They might even be able to recommend you some lawyers or somebody that could help you in more detail. So establish a solid contract. This is, of course, sounds normal, but we see that sometimes, especially when buying from Chinese companies, we see that the European buyer only has a purchase order. They only sign a purchase order where it says, describes the product to be bought, how much should be paid, and when should be delivered, and so on. 1 or 2 pages. This is wrong. You should have a contract. You should have a solid contract specifying in detail all the details about payment, delivery clauses, but also the quality inspection or dispute resolution mechanism, or should be as much as detailed as possible. And we have some standard, let's say, examples, clauses that you can use actually for. Maybe if it's a long-term partner, if you have recurring purchases or transactions, you should have a framework contract, and then maybe you can operate out of purchase orders. But if you don't, you should have a contract. If you don't have a contract and you only want to insist with a purchase order, then make sure that it is very detailed and also includes all the quality inspection clauses, all the dispute resolution, and so on. Another thing is that many, of course, if you cannot travel to China maybe and inspect the company itself yourself, but maybe some of the chambers of commerce from your country operating in China or your embassy might offer this kind of service, that they send a trusted person to inspect the goods on behalf of the European company, so they can visit the premises of the Chinese company and make some tests and so on. If there are also private companies offering this service, and this service is not particularly expensive. Of course, it depends on the product, on the testing required, on the machinery required, but in the majority of cases, it's not expensive at all. If Chinese company refuses, and this should be clearly stipulated in the contract should say that the party agreed to have a qualified inspector visiting the premises of the company. If the Chinese company refuses to do so, then I think you should be very, very, very cautious. Maybe they have something to hide, or I don't know. And of course, I would like to say that everything I mentioned now today usually involves simple transactions or basic transactions for, I don't know, a few dozens of thousands of euros or some hundreds of thousands of euros. Basic transactions involving some machinery, some raw materials. Of course, if there are, in case of bigger transactions, more complex transactions, you should always engage a lawyer, a Chinese lawyer, because they have, of course, they are much more experienced than us. They have access to a lot of financial documents, legal documents from the Chinese authorities that we cannot access, of course, because we are not lawyers. So if possible, you should always engage lawyers. Of course, if you're buying goods for 1,000 euro, then maybe it's not worth it. But if possible, you should always engage a lawyer. So these are things that you should do. I would like to say again that everything I mentioned is not a legal advice. It's nothing. We are not lawyers. Is more, let's say, good practices from on the ground business that we see here. So as USME Center, we might try to help you making some basic checks, provide some information about what to do or not to do. So please feel free to reach out to us. We will do it for free. Keep in mind that we are not lawyers. So I think we can have some time for some questions. Before that, actually, I think, sorry, forgot, very important. We have a lot of resources on this topic. I mentioned the article on this red flags. It's available there, but we also have recently completed one on sales contract. So basically how to draft sales contract when, well, in this case is when excelling to China, but I think it also applies in large part to importing from China. We also have some recording of previous webinars that we have done, and everything is for free. So I invite you to go through our website, search the publication list, or maybe on our YouTube channel and see relevant training. So I think we can have some questions now.
Yes, thank you very much, Alessio, for your presentation. I see that we already have a decent number of questions, so I would like to start with the following one. We are being asked what to do if the company shop used by the Chinese partner is not valid, but the enterprise only realized it afterwards, so did not realize it before signing the contract.
That the risk is that in case an issue occur, and then you want to initiate legal action, the risk is that Chinese courts might not recognize that contract because it's not legally valid. You might be able to provide additional evidence, for instance, some email exchanges, something that proves the, let's say, the official involvement of the company in question, but it's very difficult, and there's always the risk that the contract will be seen as null without any effect.
Okay, thank you very
much. So go for the red chop with the star in the middle, the one that I showed before. It should be that one. No other sizes, no other shapes, no other colors.
Okay. So directly related to this question, contracts that are signed electronically, are they valid?
Okay, this is a very, very good question because the short answer is no. Of course, having contracts shipped from China to Europe every time on paper, also considering that when you ship from Europe to China, your contract needs to be quarantined for a few days before it is released to the final consumer in China, might be costly, might be not easy, but in practice, contracts need to be on paper, needs to be original, because electronic ones will not be, again, we are not lawyers, but or expert lawyers with whom we partner with, they say that electronic contracts will not be recognized by courts. So you will need to work on an original contract on paper. And then if you have a dispute with a Chinese company, then the Chinese company might not be willing to help you having this contract on paper because, of course, it's not in their interest. So it should be on paper. Of course, might not always be easy, might be costly, but be aware that it should be on paper.
And on the other hand, we have a question related to the correct identification of the partner in China. So in the event that there might be some companies that have the same name, and thus this might create some problems in trying to identify which company has which website. So should I find the situation in which 3 different companies have the same name and I only find website, what should I do?
The same name.
Yes.
Okay, I think maybe this relates to English name, because if it's a Chinese name, there can only be one name. The only legal name of a company is the one in Chinese, okay? And this can only be one. If there is already if you want to be called ABC Limited, you cannot do that if there is another ABC Limited already existing. So this is the thing. What you say, I think, might relate to company names in English. Also, the example that I showed before, if you type the name of the English name of the company on search engines, you might it might lead to different websites apparently belonging to the same company, but with different logos, with different names. Well, it's difficult to know which one is the right one, to know if both are the right one. I think you should always, the bottom line, you should always keep in mind that the only legal name is the one in Chinese, so you should ask for that. Then if there is a English name, good, easier to read, but English names are chosen randomly. I mean, they have no legal value.
Okay. And we also have a question linked to the ones that you previously answered. In the specific case that a contract is signed on a printed form, so we are not talking about electronically signed contracts. Can this contract, once it is signed, be scanned and sent by email, or does it actually need to be on paper to be recognized by a court in China?
Yes, this is exactly the thing, right? Shipping a contract in original from China to Europe and vice versa every time might not be seen as a vital thing, might be costly, might not be, indeed is not the easiest, the best, well, the easiest, most convenient option. But if there is a dispute and you have to go to Chinese court, if you have to go to a European court, maybe the electronic one could be all right. I don't know. We are not, we are mostly familiar with the Chinese environment. If you have to go to Chinese court, then you will have to have the paper one. They like to have the chop in original. It should be an original contract. So of course, I'm aware that to facilitate things, sometimes we just have scanned copies of contracts. But in case issues arise, this might not be enough.
Okay. And also, are purchase orders enough when buying or selling from and to China?
Purchase orders.
Yes.
Well, we say that we always recommend that you should have solid contracts, because a contract is the safest option. And it's not, you don't necessarily need to engage law firms to have contracts, especially if it's a small transaction. Of course, if we are talking about big transactions, then yes, we should engage maybe some legal consultants. But if it's you don't need to engage law firms every time for having solid legal contracts. We also have some standard clauses, some standard contracts, some guidelines at the SME centers which are completely free and you can refer to. They were written by lawyers. So but going back to your question, the point with purchase order is that they generally don't provide a lot of useful information about, for instance, delivery terms or penalties or quality inspection, who should inspect, when will the goods be inspected, what happens if the inspection is not completed within a certain period, or other issues like the one that I mentioned before. If you want to have an auditor visiting the premises of the Chinese company to inspect the goods before they are shipped to Europe, then this should be in the contract, because you might agree verbally, but then you might sign the contract, but then when you actually engage the auditor, the Chinese company might say, no, we don't agree. They might say COVID restrictions don't allow external people. There could be any excuses, but if it's written in the contract, then it must be that way. So purchase orders sometimes, in most cases, they don't include all these details. So unless you have a very detailed purchase order, which at the end of the day will look like almost as a contract, then I would say no, you should not have a purchase order. Only if it's very detailed, but in that case there will not be much difference with a contract. So always aim for a contract and details.
I think we can also answer a couple more questions. So we have In case you are working through a Chinese trader, so there's an intermediary, is it possible to ask the trader to offer the original manufacturer source? And how should we ask for this source? And should the intermediary comply with this request?
Well, this is not an easy question. I think okay, I think first of all this information, all these procedures should be in a contract, right? You cannot force a trader to reveal this information. If they don't want to reveal this information, you can force them. What you can do is to walk away and maybe try to find another trader that offers this information. I think this is a common issue that happens, and how to ensure that the second shipment is from the same source. This maybe you can ensure it through quality inspection. Maybe once the goods are about to be loaded on the port and ready to be shipped, then maybe you can have an auditor checking it. But these are all things that should be in a contract and should be clearly stated in the contract. And if not, or if you have some suspects, then maybe you can walk away. And then, by the way, the trading companies can also be checked through the platforms that I showed before. They might also be sued. They might also have issues. So go also through these platforms and see maybe if the trading company has had some issues. You can also see on the business license, as well as on these platforms, when the trading company has been founded, has been established. If you see that the company was established in 2005, so quite a few years ago, then maybe might be a safer company compared to one that was established last year or 2 years. So it's a difficult answer. Maybe I can also ask our internal experts, legal experts on this for their opinion, but this is what I would do. So make sure that everything is in a contract, solid contract, and if you feel that it's not right, then just walk away, but you cannot enforce. Force, not enforce, sorry.
Thank you very much. And so we are, I see that we're also receiving very specific legal questions. I would just like once again to stress that the experts that we have here today are not lawyers. So all the information that we are providing are based on the experiences that we've had with USME Center partners that had these kind of issues and came asking for support on specific matters. So I'm not sure, Alessio, for example, if you would like to reply to the latest question that we received concerning the possibility for the buyer in Europe and the supplier in China to agree in the contract to have a European court to settle any kind of disputes that might arise. We are being asked, should this be the case? How is it possible for the European buyer to enforce that the EU court decision is actually followed through?
Yeah, this is really the key issue. Okay. Of course, you can have a Chinese, you can have disputes settled in a European court or international arbitration institution. Absolutely, no problem with that. The key is the enforcement of such decisions. At the end of the day, even if a court in the Netherlands has this decision, you will still need to go through a Chinese court to enforce it. And maybe this process requires another review, another all the legal process, which may still take a few years. So our recommendation is always to use Chinese courts because Chinese courts, first of all, have improved significantly in the past years, and the system is much better than it used to be. And this also applies for intellectual property, by the way. And then it will be just easy to enforce the decisions, the proceedings, the arbitration awards. It will just be easy to enforce it. And so this is what we think. If it's an European court, the only way it can enforce something is is if the Chinese company has assets in Europe. Maybe in that way they will be able to do something, but in other cases, if the Chinese company doesn't have any assets in Europe, then the European court can do nothing in practice. So our suggestion is to use the Chinese legal system, which is sometimes our perception is that people in Europe might be a lot scared by about the Chinese system, the judiciary system. I think there are a lot of prejudices, but in practice, the situation has improved significantly. And there are a lot of cases. There is evidence of European companies winning legal actions in China. There are a lot. So.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alessio. I believe we've answered to all questions that we've received. So I would like, first of all, to thank everybody for taking part to this webinar. I would also like to thank Gwenn and Alessio for staying with us and hosting this event. And I would please ask the participants to scan the QR code that you can see on the slide that I'm sharing with you right now in order to provide their feedback on this event so that we can improve and receive your direction for future events. And at the same time, I would also like to stress that USME Center is always available in order to reply to any questions and queries that you might have concerning this point or any other issues that you might encounter during your activities with China. So as I was mentioning at the beginning of this webinar, please refer to the Ask the Expert service. You can register on USME Center portal and directly ask your questions to our experts. And once again, I'm available for any queries about partnerships. Please reach out to me should you have any questions on that. My email address is on the chat session of this webinar.
Can I add something? Sorry, Davide. One very last comment. So again, we mentioned we are not lawyers, but we also have lawyers in our network. So sometimes if we receive issues which are beyond our mandate, beyond our mission, or beyond our expertise, we can refer you to trusted lawyers that we know. So we can do that. And for anything, again, as Davide mentioned, just write to us. We can help you sharing our informal opinion on certain issues. We can do that for free without any problem. So don't hesitate to contact us. And that's it. Thank you, Davide. Thank you, Gwenn, as well for doing this together with us today.
Thank you, Alessio, also for the very interesting practical information you shared for the companies today. And thank you also, Davide.
So thank you very much, everybody. It was a pleasure, and we hope to see you once again in our future events. Have a nice day, and thank you for your attendance. Goodbye.
Bye.